still trying to find a parking space and then have a chance to get in here in time. My name, for those of you who do not know, is Alice Hutchinson, and I own Byrd's Books across the street that way. So if you've not been in our store, it's very little. So when we have our author events that exceed the 30, 35 people that we can fit, we come over to the library. So I really want to thank the Bethel Public Library and everyone who has helped us with this event and many other events in town. It's really a community effort. We love our library. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for the support of the bookstore. I have been in business for 13 and a half years, and I consider it a lot of work. My mother owned a bookstore in Westport for 30, so I love, and I opened the Barnes & Noble, by the way, so I was on the opening team of corporate book selling, but what sets Indies apart is the community, and the community of people that understand the need to have a gift shop, a bookshop, a pharmacy, you know, all the locals in the downtown, and you came and supported us tonight. So I just want to thank you on behalf of all the other Indies that are in the country, because we all band together and make it happen. And they are on the rise. I get the newsletter every day, and the newsletter Shelf Awareness and some of the others are saying that, you know, they're always adding a new bookstore. So we aren't dying off. The choice to not support the dreaded A and to come to us is just wonderful. I do want to remind each and every one of you, and include myself, in silencing your cell phone. Just because there's always, you know, someone who's forgotten, and I just want to remind you. Let me tell you how it will go tonight, and then I have an important announcement. I'm gonna introduce the three authors sitting up here, and they will discuss the book that we're all here for. At the end, we'll leave it open for you to ask questions. So if a question comes up, you don't have to raise your hand, we'll automatically ask you toward the end. I know I have a couple. At the end, we're gonna take a group shot. So what we're gonna ask you to do is hold up your book, and the authors will stand somewhere in the puddle of people here, and we'll take a group shot, and it'll be just another show of community, and I really appreciate you being patient with me about that. And then after the group shot, what we'll do is the authors will go out and sit at the table where they're gonna sign your books, but we will have the raffle prizes to give away right at the end. For those of you who checked in, you got a raffle ticket, hang on to it, because that's the other half of the ones that got the jar. And we thank Penguin Random House for the generosity for the big basket with the bathrobe and the book and the, you know, all the great stuff in it, and we'll be bringing it back in here. And then I got an extra copy that was given to me by the publisher of this book, and someone will win that. So if you don't need a second book, you're gonna find out that you need to give somebody something for the holidays. So, or a birthday, or, you know, family member, or whatever you decide to do with it. A very special announcement that we're going to celebrate tonight. You are the first to hear that this book is now 15 on the New York Times bestseller list. And it's a celebration, so we're going to loosen the lips a little bit.
I'm sorry we didn't have enough.
Thank you, Dawn.
It will also help us to be more honest in talking. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Be more honest.
Did you?
Cheers.
Congratulations.
Wow. And this is, I think this is the champagne.
Yes,
amber
it is.
drinks in the book.
So that's no, yes, I can attest to that, yes.
First story ever.
Yeah. So I will tell you a little bit about the authors. Some of you already know them, some of you don't, so I will just go ahead and introduce you via the bios, and then leave Gabi and Lynn and Val to converse for a while before we open it up for questions. As many of you know, Liv Constantine is the pen name of sisters Lynn and Valerie. Lynn and Valerie are Wall Street Journal and USA Today international best-selling authors with over 1 and 1.5 copies sold worldwide. Lynn is a former marketing executive with a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University. She has explored coral reefs all over the world, sunken wrecks in the South Pacific, and fallen in love with angelfish in the Caribbean. When Lynn's not writing, you can find her curled up with her Labrador and Golden Retrievers reading a good book or walking the beach thinking up devious plans for characters. Lynn also writes the Jack Logan series under the pen name L.C. Shaw. To learn more about her other books, visit her website. Lynn serves as the Vice President, Education and Member Services of International Thriller Writers. Valerie has always loved books and spent many nights reading by the light of her bedside lamp until 3 a.m.
No more.
Well, it sounds like good anyway. She lives with her husband and their brilliant Cavalier King Charles Vinci. Is he still alive? Okay. Earlier in her career, she served as, it's okay, I can't, no, right. Sure. Earlier in her career, she served as a White House assistant at the President's Scheduling and Advance Office, planning presidential trips and travel, and has visited over 40 foreign countries. When she's not writing, you won't find her, as she and her husband will be traveling to some faraway destination. Valerie has a degree in English literature from the University of Maryland, where she graduated summa cum laude.
Ooh, wow.
Nice. Gabi Coatsworth. This is a quote from Gabi's website. Unlike many writers, I can't write in coffee shops because they're too distracting, and I only drink coffee as a last resort. I live in Connecticut in a cottage that's American on the outside and English on the inside. When I'm not reading, writing, or traveling, you'll find me in my flower garden holding a cup of my preferred beverage, strong English tea, and wondering whether to do some weeding.
Or reading.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Alice.
Well, welcome everybody. It's so lovely to see so many people, and I think you're in for a treat because I'm going to ask some of the questions that I hope you would want answered. And then if I haven't asked them everything, feel free, towards the end you can ask your own. So, this book is a sequel, as we know, to The Last Mrs. Parrish. And in between The Last Mrs. Parrish and this, you also wrote a book with a sort of background of Amber called The First Shot. So my first question, you don't have to have read either of these to enjoy this book, because somehow you two managed to tell the backstory that anyone would need to know to read this and enjoy it. And what I want to know is, how tricky was it to include that information so that someone who hadn't read the first book would get this?
It's true. Now, Lynn and I are sharing.
Do you think we even need that?
I don't know, can you hear me without it?
Yeah.
Okay, great, because Lynn actually said I could keep using it, she would just drink. Okay, I'll put it up here. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
All right. So it was tricky, you're absolutely right, because let me ask how many of you have read The Last Mrs. Parrish? Right, okay. And so we felt that there would be a lot of people coming, a lot of readers would be coming to this book having read The Last Mrs. Parrish. So we didn't want to repeat things that had already happened and bore you. And yet we still had to, in some way, communicate the fact that Jackson had been an abusive husband and what had happened in the past. So that meant coming up with new scenarios of things that he did, so that they were something that were in the first book, but you would understand, or a new reader would understand, because we very much wanted this to be a standalone and not necessary to have read, although I think it's helpful and especially the first shot, which is just a short novella, and it's Amber's story before she met Jackson, her attempt to get her first rich husband, which she did.
Although I must say that you make a wonderful job of drawing us into this story of Amber and just how extraordinarily awful she is. But I think all of you know that they write, is it alternating chapters that you write?
Yes. Yes.
So does one of you get one character and one of you get another, or how does it work?
When we wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish, we did that a little bit that way, where Valerie wrote more of Amber and I wrote more of Daphne. Mostly because Valerie was more like Amber. So.
I don't believe that,
But what we realized in subsequent books, and we still did write in other perspectives, and we always edit each other, so that helps. But what we realized was that because it would be one thing if there were different time frames, so if you're writing two characters that don't interact, then you could have a different voice. But because that's not the case, if I'm writing an Amber chapter, Daphne could appear in it, and if she's writing a Daphne chapter, Amber or Daisy Ann. So we really need to be fully invested in every single character and understand their motivation, the way that they speak, all of that, in order for them to be genuine across the board.
Okay, well, speaking of Amber and possibly Jackson, I'm told that writing villains is always more fun, really, than writing the good guys.
Much more fun.
And do you know why? I mean, can you tell us why that is? You obviously have fun writing.
Yes, we did. We have a lot of fun writing Amber. Jackson, maybe not.
I
quite
love
as
writing
much.
Jackson,
Yeah,
too.
you do, you
Yeah.
see? So now you know who's like Amber.
we knew that from
You know, I think that Amber is outrageous and she's horrible, but there's some traits that she has that are rather good. I mean, she's very focused, she's a hard worker, she does her research, she's smart. She wants to improve herself, not just to be rich, but she also wants to be able to hold her own if she's having a conversation about art or literature. She's learning a language, another language in this book, and she's even being able to read a newspaper in that language.
You can see she loves Amber.
See,
right?
Amber's really fun to write, but and I think sometimes she says things that a lot of us would like to say,
Yeah.
but don't because it would be improper or rude or whatever. But I think it's just always fun to write outlandish characters who are out of your, hopefully you don't know anyone like that, or have someone in your life like that, and you're not that way, but she's fun.
Well, you know, they do say that somehow you're dredging up the very deep, sort of dark part of your souls when you're writing the villains. Not you specifically, but all people who include villains. So with that in mind, though, I'd like to know, are there any characters in this book that you would like to have as friends? Or that maybe you based on friends?
I would love to be friends with Daisy Ann.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah, I think
She's
and
fascinating,
she's
isn't
great.
she?
Yeah, and Meredith. Meredith is a good friend.
Yeah, the thing I like about Daisy Ann is that she's able to do some sneaky stuff while doing it entirely for the right reasons.
Yes, she has integrity, but she's strong and she's determined and she's passionate and she doesn't take any crap.
No,
Which is
exactly.
nice.
And
Yeah.
she's got a great reason to do what she does.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of research, this is something I want to know. Did you have to do a lot of research into luxury goods? Because these people live in a world that's...
I mean, her credit card, you should see it.
That's sort of what I was wondering. It's like, are they wondering?
It's unbelievable when you start doing research into luxury goods. It's just mind-boggling to know what someone will pay for a towel. I mean, thousands of dollars. And just things. I mean, we all know about designer clothing and jewelry, but just the little incidentals that are so hugely expensive. And we also, I try not to do this anymore, but I would go to Zillow or Realtor.com for our different books to look up houses, like what are some gorgeous places in Dallas where some of this book takes place, or in Connecticut, to get the style of architecture and what's available. So now I get constantly bombarded with emails. Would you like to buy? We have a great house for you.
Yes.
$40 million.
Right. But we don't buy this. I mean, I did go once for one of our books to an Alfa Romeo dealer. I just got to get inside. They didn't let me take it for a test drive, but I guess they didn't think I looked like I was able to afford a $200,000 car. So that was kind of interesting. But no, we don't. I mean, I wish we could buy the things and write it off as research, but.
Tell them about the car you looked for that had a really big trunk.
No, this is just more in the way that our minds work a bit. So when we were looking for a new car, I dealers, and we opened the trunk, and I was like, wow, you could fit a body in here. Golf clubs, but okay.
Yeah, this is one of the things, if you're a thriller writer, is that your research online tends to look a bit sketchy.
I have a VPN now for that very reason, yeah, I'm like, I don't want to be on a watch list.
No, exactly. So, you mentioned researching houses in different places, and I think one of the things about this book is that it moves beyond Connecticut, so we're very glad to know that there are sociopaths everywhere. Alice, you had a question about the various locations.
First, one of the things I want to say, one of the great things about living in Connecticut and reading this book is that we're from Connecticut. So there's recognizable places, particularly South County. But I have been to Blue Springs, Missouri, and wonder where that came from. My
You've been
college
there?
roommate was from, she called it BS, Missouri, Blue Springs, Missouri, and every Thanksgiving when I was in college, I drove from Denver to her parents' house. So I know Blue Springs really well. How did you find some of your locations? I mean, they're really interesting.
You found that
I
one,
did find, there's some sort of festival in Blue Springs.
Oh, that's right.
That caught my eye. Do you remember what it is?
It's a jazz festival, I believe.
No, it was not.
It's like a potato festival.
It was something different.
No, I was more likely to go to the jazz
Right,
festival.
right. Well, Amber's family wouldn't have gone to the jazz festival, so there, it was just.
But it's
and
also the start of all of the sort of wagon trains. They staged in KCMO and went west.
Oh, okay. I think, I don't know how we actually honed in on Blue Springs. We've gotten emails
From people saying, how come you're like knocking our town?
Right.
So now, yeah, I know.
Yeah, we should have
But
made up.
your locations, where do you come up with them?
Well, Dallas came from the book, the first shot, which was Amber's first shot at getting somebody. So Valerie has a son who lives in Gunnison, Colorado. And he was saying that in the summer, a lot of rich Texans come and have their summer homes there. So when she was doing her research to figure out where to go, what ended up happening was she was running away from something, and she was working at a bar, and the bartender was
Amber, not me.
well, that was a different story. Running away from other things, but yes, Amber, Tanya, the bartender, said she was going to Crested Butte, I think, right? And so Amber was looking into it and realized, oh, there's gonna be a lot of rich Texans here. So that's why, when she married this man, Jake, who was from Texas, that's why in the sequel, we go to Texas, because his daughter is Daisy Ann. So, yeah, and so Daisy Ann has unfinished business with Amber. So that's how the whole Dallas, and the other thing was, in Last Mrs. Parrish, Bishop's Harbor was really was a character in that book. It was very much, very prominent. It was one of the things I think that stood out to people. And so we knew that for a sequel, we had to have a world that was opulent and luxurious, but we couldn't do a retread and just do Bishop's Harbor again, because again, it would have been like, yeah, we've already seen that. So while if you notice, as you read this book, there are some things, parties and stuff, but all of the really over-the-top opulent stuff is now in Texas, because we wanted to bring something new to the book. Yeah.
And so have you visited all these places? You must have visited Gunnison, right?
Many times, right.
And,
We've been to Texas, yes, we've been to Texas, and
And we did have to do
Research,
research on
yeah.
Dallas, which was fascinating. It's an amazing city, and it has a great history. So that was.
we
Yeah.
subscribe to Dallas Magazine as well, so we
Yeah.
get that every month.
And
And then you have a good friend.
I have a good friend who's from Dallas, and she sat down with me for many hours talking about the different events and people, and
it's interesting because they don't put all of this in the book, in case you think this is like a travel book about,
Right.
about America. But I think you have to know the place before you can write about
Yes,
it,
I
and
agree.
leave out so much, but so that we all get a picture of it, which we do. Gunnison sounds quite nice, actually,
It's
apart from,
yeah,
as
it's
long as
wonderful.
Amber doesn't show up again, that'd be,
Yes.
that'd be great. Now, I have a theory, and that is that it's always the sweetest ladies who come up with the most dastardly characters and crimes. And here you have the perfect proof that I am in fact correct. So how do you manage to get into the head of a sociopath like Amber? I mean, I've never noticed any tendencies like that in you. So really, I mean, this is quite a serious question. How can you imagine that?
Well, I mean, I think, and I'll let you answer as well, but I think I will let you speak.
Thank you.
Yes. I think for Amber, the primary thing initially is to figure out what Amber's motivation is. So you can't just have a character who's rotten to be rotten. So Amber is very much driven by the need to feel accepted, to feel like she is of a higher society. She's not happy with her roots. So it has to go back. There's no big trauma in her life. Now, whether or not, sociopaths are born or made is a question that is pretty much not been answered, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people think so. Maybe she was born that way, or maybe it was just a question of her being, with a lot of siblings. And I think part of it is her intelligence as well. And I'm not sure that her parents really saw how brilliant she is and nurtured that. And again, not blaming them for that, but I think that maybe, being bored and feeling better than everyone. And so that's what drives her. So in her mind, even the most horrible thing that she does, she can justify it. And I think you have to be able to have a character that can do that, the old saw that every villain is the hero of their own story.
Right.
Do you want to add some
Well,
more?
I just think that we would all love this to be a perfect world where everyone that we met and knew was wonderful and charming and kind, but I mean, I don't think that's true, and I would guess that probably every one of us knows somebody or has had someone come across their life who's not terrific, or who is maybe not a sociopath, but not wonderful. So I don't think it's uncommon here. There is a statistic about how many, like 1 in how many
Oh, yeah.
sociopaths. It's pretty low.
Right. And
The
there are
number
more,
who
there are
aren't.
more
It's-
around.
Yes, more
It's like
around.
1 in 10, 1 in 10.
Which is a lot.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, and so,
You're thinking about who you know. Right, I know.
okay. Apparently everybody's got one in their lives. Scams. First of all, this book is absolutely full of twists and turns. Just when you think you've got it figured out, who's doing what to whom, you get to the end of the chapter and boom, something else is going to happen. Is that an easy thing for you to do, or do you start with like, she went out shopping and then she killed somebody or whatever it might be, and then you go, we've got to beef this up a bit. How does that work?
Well, I mean, every scene has to have a reason for being there. So,
Right.
a lot of it comes in the editing later, right? There are things that you write, and then you go back and say, do we need this chapter? No, not really. Is it advancing the story? Is it either developing character? Is it creating conflict? Is it creating drama? And you have to answer yes to those questions, otherwise you dispense with it. And so in the first draft, we just allow ourselves to be free. I mean, we do know kind of what we're writing, so we'll say, we're not gonna write a scene about, we wanna try to think, what's a compelling scene? And where do we show everybody? But then again, we definitely have cut chapters many times in books and sections out, and also looked back and said, we need more of this. We need, more chapters that are gonna show the tension between, say, a husband and a wife, or we need a little bit more parties. And we try to end the chapter, not on a like dun 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 cheesy note, but on a note where you want to turn the page, where you're
Unexpected.
either asking a question or leaving somebody in a precarious situation. And so that comes through lots of editing and refinement. It's definitely not first draft.
That's great to me.
Yes, yes.
And and there are times too where we might give information away before it should be given away. So that's another thing when we go back and edit. It's like, well, maybe we should move this here later and keep everyone guessing, or it's too soon to reveal this. So that's what comes afterward as you're editing and polishing, rewriting.
So this, one thing that interests me is that scams of various kinds, emotional scams, financial scams, play a big part in this book. And I'm wondering whether you have ever been scammed. I mean, scams, we're getting warnings all the time. I don't know about you, but it's like my bank is saying, every time I log in, there are lots of scams around. I'm like, yeah. But have you ever been scammed yourselves?
Thankfully, no.
I have.
You have?
Well, to make this really quick, I had something go wrong with my computer.
Oh, right.
And
Oh,
I
yeah.
called Best Buy, who are they called?
Geek
The
Squad.
Geek Squad at Best Buy. So I went online to look up the number, and it said Best Buy Geek Squad, it was an 800 number. And I called them, and they came on, and blah, 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 and it sounded completely like it was them. And the guy started talking to me, he had an accent, but that doesn't mean anything, because,
Right.
you know, that's everywhere. And then he said to me, well, he said, this is a more serious problem than I thought, and I'm going to need to work on this for about half an hour, so you can log off and I'll call you back. And I said, no, I'm not, I mean, there was just something that said, don't give this guy your computer. When I told him I wouldn't do that, then he started yelling at me.
Yes,
Right?
I had the same guy 2 weeks ago. True.
Yeah, and so, but he had been he had shared the screen with me.
Right, so he was
So I was,
remotely accessing.
yeah,
it.
so I was,
Wow.
so then I just grabbed my computer and I went to Best Buy, and they said, you don't know how many people that happens to, because that comes up first.
They like buy the Google.
Yeah, and so people go on and it looks legitimate, and it's sounded it, they gave me my case number and all of that baloney. And he said, I would advise that you go to your bank, change all of your bank accounts, go into all of your credit, so.
Did you do that?
I did, I changed all the bank account numbers and the credit cards, and yeah, it was horrible.
I just want to say that the scams in the book are worse than this. So, yeah. Now, this is a sequel, of course, we all know, to The Last Mrs. Parrish. Did you always think that there was a sequel you could write? Did you always, what made you come up with something that you thought might work as a sequel?
We never thought we were gonna write a sequel to it. We thought the story was over. It's 7 years since that book came out, and people would always ask us at other book events later, and we would say, well, maybe, but we would look at each other after and say, no way. But it was the first shot, and it wasn't even immediately after the first shot, but after writing, we were asked by Audible to write a little novella, which we did, and that was the prequel. And it was Daisy Ann, that character, she's only in that last chapter, but she was so strong, and just something about her that we loved, and the more we talked about it, we thought if we brought her into the story and, and had her interact, that it could work. So we just never wanted to write a sequel because it was a popular book, just to try to, ride its
Right.
coattails. We knew that it had to be something that would be as good, if not better, and worthy of its own. And we are really happy with how it turned out, thankfully. I mean, we were really nervous, especially early readers when, NetGalley, looking at reviews, because you're waiting for somebody to be saying, oh, they should have left it alone, like, why did they, and a lot of times sequels are not as good.
Right.
So we were keeping our fingers crossed that this would be like a Godfather 2 sequel.
I think in some ways this is better. Maybe it's because you've been writing for longer and your
Maybe,
writing is
yeah.
better too, but the plotting and the expansion of characters, I think, is really effective. Yeah, read it, you'll love it. Let me have a look here. Oh, so speaking of The Last Mrs. Parrish, though, I hear that maybe there's some sort of video thing in the works. Is that true? And if so, what can we expect?
Well, Netflix has optioned it.
Oh, wow.
We had some lag time with the writers' strike,
Right.
and so the option was going to run out in June, but I guess in April, they renewed it for another year. And so there are script writers working on the script now. It seems like they've been working on it forever, but we haven't seen the script yet. And it will be a feature film, it won't be a series, but they also have the rights, the first rights to the prequel and the sequel, and anything connected with Parrish. So
Oh, that's
we'll
fabulous.
see what happens.
Yeah. Do you have any actresses that you would love to see in the parts or not?
Well, we would love to see Blake Lively as Daphne.
Yes.
That would be really good. And Henry Cavill as Jackson. Just so we can
Oh,
look
yeah,
at-
yes, such a playing against type.
Right.
Yes.
And then I think it would be, Amber, we thought, what's her name? Margot Robbie, but,
Anne Hathaway.
no, for Amber, I think she,
No.
no, because Amber's only in her 20s.
Yes, true, true, true.
Yeah.
Cindy Sweeney.
Who?
Cindy Sweeney.
Okay, I don't think that is, but okay.
Yeah, we don't know any of the
Can you
young.
hang on just a second so that they can move up? The noise from here, they can't hear as well.
Oh,
So
sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, they're going to the front row. They're going to the front
Yeah,
row.
they're-
Maybe I didn't know.
Yeah, there's
Henry
front
Ford.
row.
And then my
Plenty of room in the front.
Sorry.
And you get champagne?
There's noise behind us, thank you.
I got it.
Thank you.
That's better anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one last question, and that is, you know, you're writing books at the rate of one a year almost, and that's really hard work. So, I know you say that you travel in your time off, but I mean, really, how much time off do you get? And what do you do to unwind? I believe the walking on the beach, but is there anything else? And what do you do when you totally want to get away, so no one can find you?
What does that mean?
That means that means being offline.
I'm very rarely offline. I mean, typically, if someone texts me, they'll hear from me in 10 seconds, same with email, so it's very hard for me to disconnect. I mean, I will go down to the beach and read. I mean, my family, we just went to Greece. My husband and I hadn't been in over 25 years. My kids have never been, they're 23. So we did take a 2-week, and so that was great. I read like 3 books. I wasn't on my phone. That's really the first time probably in many years that I have been able to. That's great.
Do you feel you'd like to do it again, or did you feel nervous the whole time?
No, I enjoyed it, but no, I like to be working.
You've done for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Valerie?
Lynn is much more connected to her phone and her computer,
Yeah.
but, and so even if I'm away from it, if I don't answer an email that's gone to both of us, in about 15 minutes, I get a phone call, like, did you see the email? I haven't answered it yet.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I know.
So, yeah, it's very hard, really, to,
Yeah.
no matter what stage of the writing you're in, it's because you're either writing or editing or then promoting and then the book tour.
Yeah,
so-
I think people think that writing a book is something like, you sit at a lovely desk, you look out of the window and you write, you know, and after a couple of weeks, you've got like a book, and
Right,
then
yeah.
you send it off to a publisher who goes, that's lovely, darling, we'll publish it immediately. That used to happen to Hemingway, I think, but nobody else. So it takes a village and quite a long time, doesn't it, to go from the first idea to this.
Yes.
Well, I have asked all the questions I'd like to ask. Does anybody in the audience have something they'd like to? Oh, hello, Alex.
Well, you say how long it takes, but I didn't hear how long it takes. Because I know many authors talk about 2 to 5 years, which is why when they come to us and they say they want to self-publish, I say, no, you've cut out the editors, you've cut out a whole process there. You need to, if you really want to polish something polished, you need to go the distance and really work on it for a while. With the first book that you got published, how long did that take?
So I think we finished, I don't remember how long, I think we wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish within a year, if not less, maybe
a little bit less.
maybe
yeah.
6 or 9 months. And then we got an agent in 2016 in the summer. And then they sold it right away to HarperCollins, and they started editorial, and it came out a year later in October. So usually, once you hand your manuscript over to the editor at the publishing house, they will take, I don't know, 6 weeks to maybe even 3 months, depending on what they have, because you're not their only author, right? So you have to kind of get slotted into their schedule. They'll send back an editorial letter with a marked up manuscript, and that can take a month or so to go through. And it goes back to them, and then oftentimes they'll do a whole second developmental edit. So between the back and forth, that can be 3 to 5 months, or maybe even 6 months to finish. And then once that's done, you still get notes from proofreaders, from all different types of editors. Like, we have a little bit of a problem with time sometimes, and they'll say, well, it can't be Monday because 3 days ago, it
Right.
was whatever.
Oh, with
Yeah.
the continuity.
Right.
Or, they're swimming, but it was snowing in the last chapter, like, what season is it? And so that kind of grounding, and it just goes on and on and on, and then there's page proofs. So the whole production with a traditional publisher is at least a year, some take longer, usually, from the time you hand it over, say. And it takes us maybe 3 to 5 months to finish a book from start to finish, and, having gone through a couple rounds, if we're really diligent about writing,
So for example, the next Mrs. Parrish, the first time that we handed it to the editor at the publishing company was August of last year.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's fast.
So that is fast.
Well,
That is
then
really
we had
Because
been
you're really
writing
good.
before that.
Yeah. No, what I mean is you know how to edit it and get it back.
We
and
try to
stick
get it, we
deadlines
try to
and
get it
things.
to her very clean, and
And fast.
yeah.
Yeah, you're fast writers, I think. Maybe I should get a partner to
Yes.
write.
Yeah.
It's much easier.
There's a question over here.
Did you set out to want to be writers, or was it something about the relationship that made you want to become writers together?
I think both. We can talk about how it started.
Your
Yeah,
origin
I
story?
mean, we've always been readers, and I think both of us, in terms of writing, always excelled in school with that. And I wanted to be a criminal prosecutor. That was what I always thought I would be. I think because my family would always tell me I should be a lawyer because I would talk back. I'm the youngest, right? So, they're like, you should just be that was in my head. But then I'm a little paranoid. I was worried if I did that criminals would come after me and kill me. So I'm like, no, I'm not gonna pursue that.
There was the seed.
There right. And then I thought I was gonna be a psychologist, because I do love psychology, and that was what my undergraduate degree was in. And then I started a master's program. And then I realized I don't have the patience to sit and listen to people complain. So the two, right, so I did, I started writing and working on a thriller. I worked in corporate marketing for, 10 or some years. It was writing kind of at night and back and forth, and then it really wasn't until, and then I homeschooled my kids. That took all my energy, so it wasn't until they were in school and, maybe around 2012 that I started writing in earnest, and then we decided to collaborate in 2014, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we did write a book together that got rejected by everyone we sent it to. And as Lynn will often say, some of the best advice ever is put it away and start another one.
Yeah.
And that's when we wrote, we put it away, and we started on the last Mrs. Parrish.
I was delighted, I read tonight that Netflix had optioned for a screenplay, but my question to you is, what happens if you get that script and they've changed some of the very critical things? I remember reading My Sister's Keeper and then going to see the movie, and they changed the ending completely.
They do, they change a lot.
Or do you have any say over that?
The
How do
only way you
feel
can,
about that?
yeah, the only way you really can, I guess some writers maybe have it in their contract that they can. We don't. We're executive producers. We really don't have a say. But what I would like to do is to start writing the screenplays myself, and I've been dabbling a little bit in that, because that's really the only way, if you get attached as a screenwriter. And then what I've heard, though, even then, when it's movies or shows, there's always a group of writers, and apparently even if you get hired, then they fire you after 2 iterations and bring someone else. So, Lee Child was always fond of saying, the book is the book, the movie's the movie, and you just sort of have to let it go. Like, they owned it at that point, and hope that they stay true. And I do think they want to, because apparently one script was turned into Netflix and they rejected it and told the writers it's too different from the book. So I do think that they want, and hopefully, because you're right, I mean, you have people who are fans of something, and you know that things are gonna get cut out, of course, but you don't want it to be so different, that,
It's got to be recognized.
Exactly, right. I mean-
But you do have to sort of kiss it goodbye once.
You do, I mean, like Gone Girl's a good example of, she wrote the screenplay, and that's why that movie is just like the book.
Yeah.
Right, and same thing with The Godfather, if you've read The Godfather book, Mario Puzo worked with Coppola with that whole script. So if you're lucky enough to do something like that, then otherwise, no.
By the way, Blake Lively is coming out in August, it ends with us.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I don't know if she could do the 2 movies,
Right.
but.
Well, she should be finished with that, right?
Yes.
I'm curious just about your writing routine. How do you set up your day to get done what you need to get done?
We speak every morning
Yeah.
via Zoom, because I'm in Maryland and Lynn is in Connecticut. And we each take a chapter. And so we usually know, we don't really outline a detailed outline of the book, but we know, once we've talked everything through and have a general idea where we're going, we usually know about 10 chapters ahead of of what we need, chapter 1 is this, 2, 3. And so one of us will take one takes the other, and at the end of the day, we email our work to each other, and then we edit each other's work, or make suggestions or additions or whatever, and that just goes on every day until we have a first draft.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
How did you come up with the decision of how to structure the next Mrs. Parrish with each different person? Because if you take away, Amber's chapters and Daphne's chapters in between Daisy, it reads like it's seamless. So how did you do that seamlessly, and how did you decide to structure it that way?
Thank you. I think we usually do write multiple point of view novels. I enjoy that more. I find it a little boring to be in one character's point of view the whole time. So I think, in past books, we would always make it every other, right? But with the three of them, we just tried to do it more like events and what was going on, and just making sure that the events were sequential. And so it may, you may have more Amber chapters in a row, that not exactly in a row, but like, you know what I'm saying? It's not going to be, and I think it was more that, as opposed to saying, here's how many each of them are going to have. It's whatever was going to have to happen. We did it that way. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So this lady was next. I've got you. Carry on.
I was just gonna ask, how do you decide who's gonna start the book and who's gonna finish the book with the chapters?
Really, we do it so much of it is just done together, and there are times that we will even write out of order. It doesn't necessarily have to be chronological. We know that there's going to be this scene, and, I might say, I really feel like doing that scene today, or that chapter. So it isn't always, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And because we edit each other's work, we're both in all of the chapters. And there could be a sentence where the beginning of the sentence is Lynn's, and the end of the sentence is mine.
The only thing we're strict about is that Valerie writes all the sex
She
scenes.
knew she was gonna ask me about this every time, because it's always
That's a lot. Of which there are not too many
No.
in this book.
Yes, yeah, no.
I know, she's kidding as well. Yes.
Out of all the books you've written, do you have a favorite?
This one, the next Mrs. Parrish.
Yeah, it used to be the last Mrs. Parrish.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And the Senator's Wife was a close second, because we loved the twist in it. I mean, we love them all. But yeah, don't tell the others. This is the favorite child right now, yeah.
Is there anybody else? Here we go.
I just have a question about, thank you, by the way. I feel it's amazing that you two as sisters can do this and still
Talk to each other.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, what is if you have not an argument or, a disagreement, how do you settle on, oh, I'm not sure if it's going this way, or I'm not sure about editing? If you have this is my chapter, this is my thought.
Shut up and don't.
Like, how do you, I'm sure there's times that come up.
There definitely are. And, there haven't been that many, because we usually can talk something out and agree that, well, this is the best direction. But the 2 times that we both dug our heels in and said no, we sent the dilemma to our editor, and we didn't say who was who, and asked her to decide. And one time it was Lynn, and one time
I don't know if it's like a rock, paper, scissors.
Right.
Have you considered a third book, maybe about Jackson's children?
We are Jackson's show. Well, I don't know if it'll be about that, but we are definitely talking about it. We are thinking about it, because we do have some ideas of where, I think that they have more places to go.
I think they might.
Yeah.
But there's
She's
a lot
a little
more
more
to do
skeptical.
before
We're gonna
we-
have to, yeah.
I want to hear more about Daisy Ann. too.
Yeah, Daisy
Yeah.
Ann, and Remy too, a little bit, I
Yeah.
think, would be
Yeah.
interesting,
Yeah.
right? Remy's a minor character, but,
in an interesting
It's
way.
not that
Yeah.
you feel it's unfinished, but it's like, gosh, I like this character,
Yeah.
now what? Or,
Yeah.
this person is really a piece of work, so.
we wanna see what happens,
Yeah, do they ever get it completely? Because I have never mind, I'm not gonna say. Get to the end of the book and then let them know what you think.
Yes, tell us tag us on Instagram and tell us if we should write a third one or not.
All right.
Oh, speaking of Instagram, by the way, this necklace, there's a sweepstakes going on right now. It's not free to join, and there's a link on our Facebook and on our Instagram. If you just look through some of the posts, and there's also a link in the bio on Instagram, and you can just tenor, and they're gonna draw a winner, and it's a Connecticut mother and daughter, it's Eliza and Blinker, I think is the.
Oh, the makers of
The
it.
makers of the necklace, and it's this, what is it called, the best is yet to come is this heart necklace, so anyway, just wanted to let you guys
And
know that.
you don't have to
See
buy
the
anything,
title of
just
the book?
enter.
Yes, yes, the best is yet to come, right.
Well, time for one last question. over there.
Just out of curiosity, like, what is it like to read, just for you guys to read anybody else's book? Are you like constantly thinking like, well, hey, you know, I would have written it this way, or, you know, I wouldn't choose that word, and can you actually get lost in a book, or are you constantly thinking as a writer?
Sometimes, I mean, yes, I can, but sometimes you read and you think, oh, this is so good.
Yeah,
Wish
I think that-
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
more like an inferiority complex, I think, reading and thinking, you know, something is just so beautifully phrased. And then other times, the thing, my pet peeve, which in this genre, is when something either is a twist that comes out of nowhere that makes no sense, but it's just for shock value, or something that is unfair and unearned, you know what I mean, where you have a character doing things that they would never do. So we try really, really hard to be authentic about that and to make sure we're not, you know, we wanna trick you, but we're not gonna lie to you. So we would never have a reader thinking it's something that was untrue. We may have them speaking it because they're lying. That's, you know what I mean? So those kinds of things, those devices, if I see that in a book, it really turns me off.
You get that?
Yeah.
Okay, folks. Alice, do you want to?
If that's all there is, then I think we need to take a group shot.
Yes, definitely.
So if you guys wanna switch with me, and everybody that has a book.
And I'm gonna give you my phone,
When
too.
I'm up front, I wanna get a picture.
Here's what they said. I have, I need to give you mine.